Bolesław III Wrymouth was a Duke of Lesser Poland, Silesia and Sandomierz between 1102 and 1107 and over the whole Poland between 1107 and 1138. He was the only child of Prince Władysław I Herman, and his first wife Judith, daughter of Vratislaus II of Bohemia. Bolesław began to rule in the last decade of the 11th century, when the central government in Poland was significantly weakened. Władysław I Herman fell under the political dependence of the Count Palatine Sieciech, who became the real ruler of the country. Backed by the father, Bolesław and his half-brother Zbigniew finally expelled Sieciech from the country in 1101, after several years of fighting. After the death of Władysław I Herman in 1102, two independent states were created ruled by Bolesław and Zbigniew. Bolesław sought to gain Pomerania, which caused an armed conflict between the brothers, and forced Zbigniew to flee the country and seek military help from Germany. Bolesław effectively stopped the intervention of the German King Henry V in 1109 and punished Zbigniew by blinding him. This action caused outrage among supporters of Zbigniew, resulting in a political crisis in Poland. Bolesław once again gained the favor of his subjects with public penance, and made a pilgrimage to the monastery of his patron, St. Giles. In Hungary, Bolesław, like Bolesław II the Generous, based his foreign policy on maintaining good relations with neighboring Hungary and Kievan Rus, with whom he forged strong links through marriage and military cooperation in order to break the political dependence on Germany and his vassal, the King of Bohemia, who in moments of weakness of Polish policy was forced to pay tribute in Silesia. These alliances have allowed Bolesław to effectively defend the country from invasion by Henry V 1109. Several years later, Bolesław skillfully took advantage of the dynastic disputes in Bohemia to ensure peace on the southwest border. Bolesław devoted the second half of his rule to the conquest of Pomerania. In 1113 he conquered the northern strongholds along Notek, which strengthened the border with the Pomeranians. In subsequent years, he took steps toward the conquest of Pomerania. The resolution of the conflict with the Holy Roman Empire allowed Bolesław to subordinate Western Pomerania and incorporate Gdansk Pomerania. The military expeditions, carried out in 3 stages, ended in the 1120s with military and political successes. Integration of the newly annexed lands enabled Bolesław to build churches and began the process of converting Pomerania. Bishop Otto of Bamberg confirmed the Christianization of Pomerania from 1123 onward. In the 1130s, Bolesław participated in the dynastic dispute in Hungary. After an unexpected defeat, he was forced to make an agreement with Germany. The Congress of Mersburg of 1135 addressed the issues of Pomerania, Silesian sovereignty and the supremacy of the Archbishopric of Magdeburg over the Polish Church. Bolesław was married twice. His first marriage with the Kievan princess Sobislava gave him an excuse to intervene militarily in the internal affairs of Russia. After her death, Bolesław married to a German noblewoman, Salomir of Berg, which in some way was the cause of changes in Polish foreign policy. In the second half of his rule, the prince sought to restore diplomatic relations with his western neighbor. His last, and perhaps the most momentous act, was his will and testament known as the Succession Statute, in which he divided the country among his sons, leading to almost 200 years of feudal fragmentation of the Polish kingdom. Bolesław III Wrymouth has been recognized by historiography as a symbol of Polish political aspirations until well into the 19th century. He also upheld the independence of the Polish Archbishopric of Gniezno, despite a temporary failure in the 1130s. Despite undoubted successes, he committed serious political errors, most notably against Zbigniew of Poland, his half-brother. The crime against Zbigniew and his penance for it show Bolesław's great ambition as well as his ability to find political compromise. Childhood situation of Poland during the 1080s. In 1086, the coronation of Vratislav II as King of Bohemia and his alignment with Laszlo I, King of Hungary, threatened the position of the Polish ruler, Prince Władysław I Herman. Therefore, that same year Władysław I was forced to recall from Hungarian banishment the only son of Bolesław II the Bold and a rightful heir to the Polish throne, Mieszko Bolesławicz. Upon his return, young Bolesławicz accepted the overlordship of his uncle and gave up his hereditary claim to the crown of Poland in exchange for becoming first in line to succeed him. In return, Władysław I Herman granted his nephew the district of Kraków. The situation was further complicated for Władysław I Herman by a lack of a legitimate male heir. His firstborn son Zbigniew came from a union not recognized by the Church. With the return of Mieszko Bolesławicz to Poland, Władysław I normalized his relations with the Kingdom of Hungary as well as Kiev and Rus. These actions allowed Herman to strengthen his authority and alleviate further tensions in international affairs. Birth of Bolesław. Name and nickname. The lack of a legitimate heir, however, remained a concern for Władysław I, and in 1085 he and his wife Judith of Bohemia sent rich gifts, among which was a life-size statue of a child made of gold, to the Benedictine sanctuary of St. Giles in St. Giles, Provence, begging for offspring. The Polish envoys were led by the personal chaplain of Duchess Judith, Piotr. The date of birth of Bolesław is closely linked with the death of his mother Judith. This fact is evidenced by contemporary sources. Gallus Anonymous in the Chronicae Gestaducum Sive Principum Pollinorum reported the Duchess Judith gave birth to Bolesław on the day of King Saint Stephen of Hungary. However, the Duchess's health never recovered from childbirth and died on the night of Nativity. Gallus did not note that year in his chronicle. Cosmas of Prague wrote in Latin in his Chronica Bohemorum that Bolesław was born 3 days before the death of Judith, who died in 8 calends of January of 1085. The Kalendarz Krakowski said that Duchess Judith died on the 24th of December 1086, and only indicated that the birth of Bolesław was in the same year. The obituary of the Abbey of St. Giles reported the death of Judith on the 24th of December 1086. The Rocznik Kapituli Krakowskie placed the death of Judith on the 24th of December 1086. Historian August Bielowski established Bolesław's birth on the 26th of December 1085 and the death of his mother 2 days later on the 28th of December. According to him, Gallus Anonymous committed 2 errors. First, instead of the Sunday after the Nativity of the Lord, wrote incorrectly in the Sunday of the Nativity. Secondly, he mistaken the day of St. Stephen with the festivities of King Stephen of Hungary. Both corrections lead to the birth date of Bolesław on the 26th of December. This theory was supported by the fact that in 1085 the 28th of December fell on a Sunday. Oswald Balzer refuted Bielowski's theory and pointed that Judith's death was on the night between 24–25 December 1086, and the birth of Bolesław was 4 months before, on the 20th of August. According to him, if Judith died on the night between 24–24 December, a possible discrepancy in determining the exact date of the event. All known sources who placed the death of Judith would then write Gallus read that Judith died shortly after giving birth to a son. Later sources interpret this as a death in childbirth, and Cosmas of Prague followed this fact, despite he didn't receive the information at first hand. Hence, his mistake would result in this point. In contrast, the right indicated by Gallus' date of birth of Bolesław would be the 20th of August. In the medieval tradition, the year began on the 25th of December. In that case, the reports of Cosmas must be concluded that Bolesław was born yet in 1085. This information, however, was in contradiction with the reports of the Kalendarz Krakowski, who gave the year 1086. Judith was styled by the authors of the Kalendarz as Regina Polonia, and this title could be associated with her father's coronation as King of Bohemia and Poland on the 15th of June 1086. Karol Malachinski refuted the arguments of Balzer, who accepted the date of the coronation of Vratislav II given by Cosmas. However, most researchers indicate that the coronation took place on the 15th of June 1085, so Judith could be called queen a year earlier. Karol Malachinski determined that the death of Judith took place on the night between 24–25 December 1085, and Bolesław was born 4 months before, on the 20th of August. Researchers found that the date given by the Rocznik Kapituły Krakowskie was the same established by Cosmas. The difference in the year could be explained in the difference of style dating followed by Cosmas, who began the year according to the Julian calendar on the 1st of January and Christmas on the 25th of December. For Malachinski, Kazimierz Jasinski not consider this calendar difference, who occurs only during the period 25 to 31 December. Archaeologist Wojciech Safranski reassumed the theory of Bielowski. Judith of Bohemia died on the 28th of December 1085, and Bolesław was born 2 days before, on the 26th of December. According to Safranski, Cosmas used the term 8 calends of January, with no specific date. However, in the Chronicle of Gallus should read that Judith died on Christmas Day, but on Sunday in the octave of Christmas. Using such a broadened range of days, the investigator determined the birth of Bolesław in the feast of St. Stephen. For this reasons, the date of 1085 given by Bielowski is correct according to him. However, Jasinski pointed the weaknesses of the argument of Safranski because Gallus has written about the octave, but specifically about Christmas night, but the investigator didn't consider all other sources, as well as the achievements of research in genealogy. Marian Plesier argued that Bolesław was born on the 2nd of September 1085 at 1086. According to Gallus, the day of King Stephen of Hungary was also celebrated on the 2nd of September. Jasinski considered this theory unfounded. In Poland, the feast of King Stephen of Hungary is pointed by the Kalendarz Krakowski and the Kalendarz Kodeksu Gertrudi on the 20th of August. Besides, if Bolesław was born on the 2nd of September, Gallus probably would be noted that this was the day after the celebration of St. Giles, which was attributed to be the intercessor of his birth. Kazimierz Jasinski placed the death of Judith in the night between 24–25 December 1086 and the birth of Bolesław 4 months before, on the 20th of August. In this point he agrees with the findings of Balzer. He supported his views with additional arguments. All sources are based in the missing Rocznika Kapituły Krakowskie, and the next known text of this source refers to events in 1086. Cosmas, writing his chronicle a few decades later, probably benefited from oral tradition and could make a mistake when he placed the year. His reports who placed the birth of Bolesław 3 days before the death of his mother denoted a quite short time. Today is widely recognized the view of both Jasinski and Balzer that Bolesław most likely was born in the day of King Stephen of Hungary. the 20th of August 1086. According to Cosmas of Prague, Bolesław was named after his uncle, Bolesław II the Generous. Władysław I Herman had no reason to name his firstborn legitimate son after his brother, but probably in this way tried to placate the former allies of his predecessor. Bolesław's nickname, Wrymouth, appeared in Polish and Latin sources of the 13th century. Genealogy Ploche and the Roczniku Świętoszyskim Yodzim. Probably the origin of this nickname dates back on the 12th century and is related with some physical characteristics of the Polish ruler, who were noticed at the time of his reign. Probably he began to be named in this way after 1114, because Gallus Anonymous in his chronicle never mentioned it. In the Chronis Casiusat Polskich and Chronis Polsko-Slaskie, Bolesław was qualified by the Latin adjective curvus, whose significance remains unclear. According to the 14th century Chronikio Piotr's Włostowiku, the prince was hunchbacked and had a crooked mouth. The 15th century chronicler Jan Długosz wrote, he had a mouth on one side slightly bent, and for this he was called Wrymouth. However, this is not marred his face, and even added to him some charm. In 1974, in the Masovian Blessed Virgin Mary Cathedral of Plock, where according to tradition Bolesław was buried, an archaeological research project was conducted. A coffin was discovered containing the bones of 16 men and women. One of the skulls, of a man who died aged 50, had a deformed mandible. There is a hypothesis that these remains belonged to Bolesław. Opponents of this theory suggest that the prince was named in this way many years after his death, and his contemporary Gallus did not mention any physical defect in the hero of his chronicles. The defenders of the hypothesis argue that the work of Gallus has the characteristics of a panegyric in honor of Bolesław, because the chronicler did not mention his physical infirmities. It is also speculated that the bone damage occurred as a result of childbirth complications, which led to the death of his mother a few months later. The nickname of Bolesław was also explained in other ways. According to a legend, Bolesław slammed his face against a wall after watching his father's subservience towards the Germans and Czechs. According to Jan Długosz, the prince in his youth suffered from an ulcer, which caused the deformity of his face. According to older historiography, he received the nickname Wrymouth for his perjury. Early years. Following Bolesław's birth, the political climate in the country changed. The position of Bolesław as an heir to the throne was threatened by the presence of Mieszko Bolesławicz, who was already 17 at the time and was furthermore, by agreement with Władysław I Herman himself, the first in line to succeed. In all likelihood it was this situation that precipitated the young Prince Mieszko's demise in 1089. In that same year, Władysław I Herman's first-born son Zbigniew was sent to a monastery in Quedlinburg, Saxony. This suggests that Władysław I Herman intended to be rid of Zbigniew by making him a monk, and therefore depriving him of any chance of succession. This eliminated two pretenders to the Polish throne, secured young Bolesław's inheritance as well as diminished the growing opposition to Władysław I Herman among the nobility. Shortly after his ascension, however, Władysław I Herman was forced by the barons to give up the de facto reins of government to Count Palatine Sieciech. This turn of events was likely due to the fact that Herman owed the throne to the barons, the most powerful of whom was Sieciech. Around this time, Władysław I Herman married again. The chosen bride was Judith Maria, daughter of Emperor Henry III and widow of King Solomon of Hungary, who after her wedding took the name Sophia in order to distinguish herself from Władysław I Herman's first wife. Through this marriage Bolesław gained 3 or 4 half-sisters, and as a consequence he remained the only legitimate son and heir. It's believed that the new duchy was actively aiding Sieciech in his schemes to take over the country and that she became his mistress. Position of Sieciech in Poland. In 1090, Polish forces under Sieciech's command managed to gain control of Gdansk, Pomerania, albeit for a short time. Major towns were garrisoned by Polish troops, and the rest were burned in order to thwart future resistance. Several months later, however, a rebellion of native elites led to the restoration of the region's independence from Poland. The following year a punitive expedition was organized, in order to recover Gdansk, Pomerania. The campaign was decided at the Battle of the Wda River, where the Polish knights suffered a defeat despite the assistance of Bohemian troops. Prince Bolesław's childhood happened at a time when a massive political migration out of Poland was taking place, due to Sieciech's political repressions. Most of the elites who became political refugees found safe haven in Bohemia. Another consequence of Sieciech's political persecution was the kidnapping of Zbigniew by Sieciech's enemies and his return from abroad in 1093. Zbigniew took refuge in Silesia, a stronghold of negative sentiment for both Sieciech as well as his nominal patron Władysław I Herman. In the absence of Sieciech and Bolesław, who were captured by Hungarians and kept captive, Prince Władysław I then undertook a penal expedition to Silesia, which was unsuccessful and subsequently obliged him to recognize Zbigniew as a legitimate heir. In 1093 Władysław I signed an act of legitimization which granted Zbigniew the rights of descent from his line. Zbigniew was also granted the right to succeed to the throne. Following Sieciech and Bolesław's escape from Hungary, an expedition against Zbigniew was mounted by the Count Palatine. Its aim was to nullify the act of legitimization. The contestants met at the Battle of Goplo in 1096, where Sieciech's forces annihilated the supporters of Zbigniew. Zbigniew himself was taken prisoner, but regained his freedom a year later, in May 1097, due to the intervention of the bishops. At the same time, his rights, guaranteed by the act of legitimization, were reinstated. Simultaneously, a great migration of Jews from Western Europe to Poland began circa 1096, around the time of the First Crusade. The tolerant rule of Władysław I Herman attracted the Jews, who were permitted to settle throughout the entire kingdom without restrictions. The Polish prince took great care of the Hebrew diaspora, as he understood its positive influence on the growth of the country's economy. The new Jewish citizens soon gained trust of the Gentiles during the rule of Bolesław III. Youth division of the country in view of his father's disapproval, and after discovering the plans of Sieciech and Duchess Judith Sophia to take over the country, Zbigniew gained an ally in the young prince, Bolesław. Both brothers demanded that the reins of government should be handed over to them. It is difficult to believe, however, that Bolesław was making independent decisions at this point, as he was only 12 years of age. It is postulated that at this stage he was merely a pawn of the barons' power struggle. Władysław I Herman, however, agreed to divide the realm between the brothers, each to be granted his own province, while the prince Władysław I himself kept control of Mazovia and its capital at Plock. Władysław also retained control of the most important cities, i.e. Wrocław, Kraków and Sandomierz. Zbigniew's province encompassed Greater Poland, including Gniezno, Kujawia, Lechia-Land and Sieradz-Land. Bolesław's territory included Lesser Poland, Silesia and Lubusz-Land. The division of the country and the allowance of Bolesław and Zbigniew to co-rule greatly alarmed Sieciech, who then began preparing to dispose of the brothers altogether. Sieciech understood that the division of the country would undermine his position. He initiated a military settlement of the issue and he gained the prince's support for it. The position of Vladislav I is seen as ambiguous as he chose to support Sieciech's cause instead of his son's fight against Sieciech. In response to Sieciech's preparations, Bolesław and Zbigniew entered into an alliance. This took place at a popular assembly at WIEC organized in Wrocław by a magnate named Skarbimir of the Ordeniec family. There it was decided to remove the current guardian of Bolesław, a noble named Bolesław who was a relative of Sieciech, and arrange for an expedition against the Palatine. Subsequently, in 1099, the armies of Count Palatine and Prince Herman encountered the forces of Zbigniew and Bolesław near Arnowiec by the river Pilica. The forces of Bolesław and Zbigniew defeated Sieciech's army, and Władysław I Herman was obliged to permanently remove Sieciech from the position of Count Palatine. In the same year, at Christmas, Bolesław concluded a short-lived peace with Bohemia. The agreement was concluded in Sieciech. According to Cosmas, Bolesław was appointed Miecznik of his uncle Vratislaus II, Duke of Bohemia. In addition, the young prince would be paid the amount of 100 pieces of fine silver and 10 talents of gold annually as a tribute to Bohemia. Rebel forces were then further directed towards Sieciech, where the Palatine took refuge. Unexpectedly, Prince Władysław came to the aid of his besieged favorite with a small force. At this point, the princes decided to depose the father. The opposition sent Zbigniew with an armed contingent to Masovia, where he was to take control of Plock, while Bolesław was directed to the south. The intention was the encirclement of the father Prince Władysław I. The prince predicted this maneuver and sent his forces back to Masovia. In the environs of Plock, the battle was finally joined and the forces of Władysław I were defeated. The prince was thereafter forced to exile Sieciech from the country. The Palatine left Poland around 1100–1101. He was known to sojourn in the German lands. However, he eventually returned to Poland but did not play any political role again. He may have been blinded.